So committee, we'll go ahead and start here. We'll bring the Welfare Committee meeting to order. This is a Tuesday, March 14th meeting. For today, we just have a hearing on House Bill 2179. So, it's like hopefully there'll be some questions, but looks like we can get this in fairly quickly. So with that, I ask Jesse from the Revisor's Office to give a quick summary of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Today's hearing is on House Bill 2179. This bill amends KSA 39709, which this committee is familiar with. So specifically, the change that this bill proposes can be found on page 5. And what it does is in subsection B, paragraph 10, it strikes non-cooperation as the failure of an applicant to comply with federal laws, federal state regulations, policy, and then in the next sentence, it also strikes child care subsidy or TANF. So therefore, what this bill proposes is that non-cooperation with child support services would not render an applicant ineligible to receive a child care subsidy if this bill were to be passed. And then to reflect that requirement that would no longer exist. On page 18, it would remove child care benefits from the requirement that the right to receive those are assigned over to the secretary for them to receive those child support payments. And that's what this bill does. If there's any questions, let me know.
Any questions for the revisers? All right, thanks, Jesse. That was easy. So we'll start then with the proponents. This would be Tanya Keys, Deputy Secretary, Kansas Department of Children and Families. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. Good to see you again. Thanks for the opportunity today to provide testimony in support of 2179. The agency has brought forward this concern and these changes in introducing this bill in response to a letter of preliminary notice of noncompliance finding from our federal partners, Administration of Children and Families, that in that letter that we received in March of 2022. So last year, we received the letter and it let us know that current state law was not comporting or in compliance with the federal regulations around child care. That's highly summarized, the reason why we're bringing it. And just a reminder, this bill is specific to child care assistance. So that's its concentrated focus is child care, and to remove cooperation with child support in order to receive child care assistance. Under current state law, families are disqualified from child care benefit for non-cooperation, for progressive periods of time for non-cooperation with child support. How that's written currently in Kansas is not in compliance with the federal requirements or regulations that say, you know, once a family becomes eligible for that child care assistance, they need to be eligible for 12 continuous months, and nothing can interrupt that 12 continuous months. So that's the piece that we're worried about, that we are in non-compliance and we need to find remedy. This bill eliminates the requirement of families receiving child care assistance for not cooperating with child support services. And so this change would bring the agency back into compliance around child care assistance, and then we would no longer have the risk of up to a 4% penalty of our discretionary funds, which ends up, if it would come to fruition as the penalty, would be about $2.7 million loss in our federal child care funding. For the agency, there would be a fiscal impact so that we can make changes to our information system. However, that cost, which is about $500,000, would be covered through federal funds. And that is the essence of the reason why we've introduced this bill, in hopes of avoiding a penalty and moving forward so we can be in compliance with the federal requirements on child care assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for Representative Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you say when you got the letter of preliminary notice of possible noncompliance?
We've received two. The most recent was March 9th of 2022.
And there was one before that then, apparently.
We received, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, thank you, and Representative, we did receive some information on December 13th of 2021. And then clarity on March 9th of 2022.
And, but nothing from them since then. Would that be normal when you're getting notices from the federal government that like a year would go by without hearing anything?
Mr. Chair, Representative, we have had conversations with them about this. They were aware that we were trying to find remedy through state law. So the letters are formal, and then they might begin a conversation around what might be possible corrective action. The letter itself contained other items that the state needed to be in compliance with for DCF and Department of Health and Environment. So there have been ongoing conversations subsequent to this letter on a number of items, which also included this item. And they knew that we were unable to remedy this item until we could bring forward a bill and have this conversation with our legislature.
The other items you've are addressing too, the other ones that they mentioned?
Yes, the state is addressing them.
And then you mentioned 4% penalty or something. Is that from all of those things, or just this one thing in particular? Were they specific about that in the letter, about what kind of penalty we might get?
The penalty language from our federal partners is specific and set forth, and it's just designed as the penalty may involve up to 4% of the state's discretionary funds.
If all the things in the letter weren't addressed, or if this one particular, each thing got us a different warning?
We would understand it could be one or any,
okay.
Or all,
right.
or any remaining that would not be ultimately in compliance after an opportunity for corrective action or planning for remedy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. So in this case, did they give you a time frame of when this needed to be completed by, or did they basically leave that to the will of the legislature?
For this item, they understood that our time frame was around the legislative session, so they were aware that it would take some time or could take some time for remedy on this path.
Did they indicate what would occur if this remedy wasn't found through passage of this bill?
They've not indicated any other consequence other than their letter, which let us know, and federal regulation lets states know, again, that penalty can be up to 4% if ultimately we are not found in compliance.
So then if we weren't to pass this out, that would essentially mean that the state would be responsible for paying the federal government up to 4% simply because our state laws don't align with the federal guidelines, correct?
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, that would be possible, yes.
Okay, thank you. I just needed clarification. Appreciate it.
So, yeah, I think everybody's clear on where the question is more about. We need 12 months of continuation or of continual welfare benefits once a person starts. And under current statute, the interpretation is that as soon as somebody is non-cooperative, the benefits stop pretty much immediately. Is that kind of a quick summary of that?
Yes, they could stop at points in time when there is no child support cooperation within that 12 months.
Yeah. Can you go over the fiscal note in more specific explanation on what changes are needed in your system?
I know the amount was 500,000. I apologize, I'm looking for the actual fiscal note. The costs are associated with programming for our information system to relieve or provide edits in the system so that we can make sure that that non-cooperation, what's entered in the information system, to make sure that they would still be eligible. We would have to, our information system now is programmed according to current law, so we'd have to change that so that when that non-cooperation with child support happens, that it doesn't trigger the system to enter that and stop the benefit. So programmer time to be able to accomplish that.
You're estimating $500,000 to remove that trigger?
Yes, there are one-time costs.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of to bounce off of your question, I maybe misunderstood you, but did you say that that $500,000 would be paid for fully by the federal government in order to make that transition, or is that something that we would be required to pay as a state?
The cost for the programming changes to the information system are 100% federal funds. No state general fund would be needed to cover the costs of the changes to the information system.
So just to be perfectly clear, that means that the $500,000 that you're saying is associated with this in the fiscal note would not be absorbed by the state. That would come from the federal government, correct?
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I may have a question later in the meeting. So if you're willing to, maybe at the end of the meeting, take a question on the fiscal note. Thank you. Committee, any further questions? All right, Madam Secretary, thank you very much for your presentation. Then, yeah, I may have a quick question at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
In committee, there are several written-only proponents. Looks like we have 5, and those should be in your packet. And at this point, we'll move on to the opponent portion of the hearing. Steve Green, asks that we just keep it quick and then open up for maybe a few questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Welfare Reform Committee. My name is Steve Green. I represent the Opportunity Solutions Project. You have my testimony before you. One thing that I always remember is when people testified neutral, and they pretty much were opponent or proponent, but testified neutral. And so this was, right there on neutral, but wanted to point out something that I think is helpful as you all consider this. The reason why we're opposing this isn't because we want to take in consideration the changes in the Child Care Development Fund block grant and the requirements for continuous eligibility for child care. It was just the appeal as you all think about this, and the reason why we oppose it is that, in essence, it's in the testimony on the second to last paragraph on the first page. Just as you consider what the options are, we fundamentally think that child support is a good policy in this area. We've seen success in different facets as it's been implemented. And so what we would ask is that you would consider the other additional option that was in the letter that the feds provided DCF, and it's the option of assessing the penalty for non-cooperation after the full 12 months of eligibility. I think that would keep the policy of child support cooperation in place. You would provide the 12 months of continuous eligibility for child care, and so you wouldn't require losing any federal funds, but still requiring child support cooperation, which we believe is a good policy. So with that, happy to stand for questions. Thank you for the opportunity. I know you've all had a long day. Thank you for hearing this testimony.
Thank you, committee. Any questions? Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your estimation, would that would we need to pass a bill or an amendment to get to the piece where we don't just stop it, but we let it go for 12 months?
Correct. So, and I should have included this in the testimony, I apologize. Consider a balloon amendment that would allow for the continuous eligibility for 12 months, and that would alleviate our concerns or opposition to the bill. It's noted in the letter that the DCF received.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for appearing here today. So when you are speaking of the other option of assessing the penalty for non-cooperation, are you speaking about the up to 4% penalty that the state would be required to pay in order to stay compliant if we pay the penalty?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you. I appreciate the chance to clarify. So we share the same concerns about receiving the penalty, the 4%. In the letter that was provided to DCF, and this committee a few weeks, I don't remember exactly when, it gave 3 different options for consideration to maintain compliance with CCDF reauthorization funds. And one of them was the one that's listed in our testimony. And so what we believe is that we can kind of have a policy that we support, which is child support cooperation. And also, if by adopting a balloon amendment, would allow DCF to maintain continuous eligibility, which is the recommendation from the feds. And so we think that would alleviate the concerns the feds have related to the 4% penalty.
Follow up. So I'm trying to put this together. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it's your position that we should pay the 4% penalty in order to keep going with this program, or I'm a little confused, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't think you should take the 4% penalty. And I apologize for not doing a good job of articulating my position. So our position would be to take the recommendation that the feds provided, and so there was several different options. DCF took the option of just removing cooperation altogether, and that was one of the options provided to avoid the 4% penalty. The option that was noted in our testimony is one of the 3. And so what we would suggest is adopting that policy, or adopting that balloon amendment if you were to consider such amendments. And that would allow you to maintain child support cooperation as a policy for this program, but also allow you to not the state to be fined a 4% fee for not being compliant with federal changes that have occurred.
Thank you for clarifying.
Questions, committee? Any further questions? With that, thank you very much.
Thank you
for your testimony. Yes, committee, I'm going to kind of left it open also for questions at the end for Deputy Secretary Tanya Keys. I do have one, if you're willing, just real quick on this one. So with the main concern from the federal letter, it's the stopping of benefits before the full 12 months have gone by. So with your system and the child care benefit, do you currently do an annual redetermination for these benefits? How do you follow up as kind of a part of a long-term process? How do you check in on them? Can you walk us through that?
Sure, yes, thank you. As you've heard for some other programs as well, there are annual or intermittent reviews or natural reviews, but yes, they're typically a 12-month review for that benefit.
Okay, that's great. And that's all currently possible with your existing computer systems?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it is.
Thanks. That's the only question I had. Committee, any questions? Tanya Keys? All right, thank you very much. And that will conclude then the hearing on House Bill 2179. And we postponed the Medicaid kind of presentation until we'll just pick that up on Thursday. Committee, I do plan on discussing and working this bill on Thursday. And so just be prepared. We'll probably start the meeting with the discussion on the bill. And we'll have, there will be an amendment. I'm currently working on one with DCF. Want to make sure we try to help them, but also may consider some of the other ideas. So there's no questions. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Not at this time. I think on Thursdays, that's when we'll try to hit a few more minutes. All right, with that, committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.